Good day. This video is going to be mainly about the allusions in the television shows Patrulha Salvadora and Carousel. It says here that Carousel is a Mexican children's telenovela produced by Valentin Pimstein for Televisa. In 1989, it is based on the Argentinian character Jacinta Pichimahuida, first televised in 1966 and produced by and broadcast on Televisa in 1989. It covers daily life in a Mexican elementary school and the children's relationships with a charismatic teacher named Jimena. Among other plot devices, it deals with the differences between the upper and lower classes of Mexican society, specifically as seen in a romantic relationship between Cirillo, a poor so-called black boy, and a spoiled so-called white rich girl, Maria Joaquina Villaseñor. Continuing on, it also says among the main characters, Cirillo Rivera is a good boy and the only child of so-called black ancestry in school. He is the son of a humble carpenter and a housewife who adore him to the utmost. And then he also says Maria Joaquina Villaseñor is a rich girl, daughter of a renowned and prestigious physician, Dr. Miguel Villaseñor. Beautiful, selfish, overlooked by her classmates, but eventually learns to value the important things in life. This is the logo for the show Carousel, the one that was remade in 2012. As is shown here, the behind the word carousel, you can see the sun. It's like the sun symbolism. It's radiating. This is one of the many symbols in the show. And to provide some context, this here is someone by the name of Charlie Mumbai. He was one of the one of the most famous so-called Christian musicians in the DRC. And as is shown here in this album cover called Retro, he also has the same type of symbolism with his head structured right in the middle of the sun rays, showing him as a so-called enlightened figure. Once again, most of these people who act like they're Christian musicians, they're all in the know. Continuing on, now this here is the biography or the biography of this show called Patrulha Salvadora. It states here that Patrulha Salvadora is a Brazilian television series produced by SBT, whose original broadcast took place between January 11th, 2014 and January 24th in 2015. It was written by someone called Iris Abravanel with the collaboration of Carlos Marquez, Fanny Higuera, Grace Iwashita, Gustavo Braga, and Marcela Arantes, and text supervision by Rita Valente with general direction by Ronaldo Burri. It was a spin-off from the Brazilian soap opera Carousel by the same author, which in turn was based on the work by Valentin Pimstein. Carousel, a remake by Jacinta Pichimahuida, La Maestra que no se olvida, created by Abel Santa Cruz. So this show here, Patrulha Salvadora, is just a continuation of Carousel. So one of the plots in this show, Patrulha Salvadora, in the fourth season, it was that same character, Cirillo. He was taken into captivity in ancient Egypt, and then his job was to, so his so-called friends gave him up because that's what the king or the pharaoh asked for, and then he was supposed to go, and in the end he was supposed to go and save his uh, his friends from the reign of the Egyptian king. So he reads here in the fourth season of this show, Patrullo Salvador. It says the fourth season tells the story of a pharaoh from ancient Egypt who is transported to the present day to try to build a contemporary empire using his 10 pharaonic soldiers to attack the city of Chrysopolis with the 10 plagues from the Old Testament. The patrol has had major external and internal conflicts, including with Cirillo, but everyone comes together for the final clash. In the last episode, the heroes are faced with a battle against the great villain soldiers. Patrollers need to organize themselves to try to win the difficult fight. Cirillo, owner of the power of a pure heart, reunites with his friends after a long period of training with Zaphenat Panea, who is considered the so-called savior of the Asian world. In the end, Valeria receives the power to scream very loudly to the point of throwing her enemies away. So this here is one of the promotional posters of this show, Patrullo Salvador. As is shown here, all the patrullas, they're posing in a way to form the upper triangle. As you can see, as is shown here, the people posing in a triangle, and then the PS is in the middle, representing the eye. So this is like the all-seeing eye, which is also found on the back of the dollar bill. So these pictures here, these are the actor and actress who played Cyril and Maria Joaquina. On the left is the carousel from the original carousel from 1989, and then on the right is the newer version from 2012. This show carousel was very heavy programming because it tried to bring together the so-called black child whose character was Cirillo, with the so-called white young girl who's Maria Joaquina. And then throughout the show, this Maria Joaquina was broken down because at first she never used to like him, but then he was being nice, and then he was overdoing it until she succumbed to him. So this thing was heavy programming for the children back then. Okay, the first allusion that I found while watching this show was the Thriller Michael Jackson. As many people know, as many of you know, in Thriller, Michael Jackson, he wore that, it was like a red jacket, and then his hair looked like he had poured or applied gel to it. Similarly, in this Patrullo Salvador show, in one of the episodes, it starts off with them trying to redo Thriller, and then this here is one of the pictures. Cirillo here is acting as Michael Jackson. And this is a second picture of Cirillo once again acting as Michael Jackson from his famous and infamous music video Thriller. I just wanted to go back to this slide here, so in order to transition to the next thing that I'm trying to do, which is talking about one of the other allusions that was in this show of Joseph from the Bible. I'm just going to read these two paragraphs again. It says, the fourth season tells the story of a pharaoh from ancient Egypt who is transported to the present day to try to build a contemporary empire using his 10 pharaonic soldiers to attack the city of Chalcopolis with the 10 plagues from the Old Testament. The patrol has had major external and internal conflicts, including with Cirillo, but everyone comes together for the final clash. In the last episode, the heroes are faced with a battle against the great villain soldiers. Patrollers need to organize themselves to try to win a difficult fight. Cirillo, owner of the power of a pure heart, reunites with his friends after a long period of training with Zaphenate Panea, who is considered the so-called savior of the ancient world. In the end, Valeria receives the power to scream very loudly to the point of throwing her enemies away. This here is just, these are some photos showing, once again, Cirillo, the so-called black boy, as Joseph. Once again, the people who make these shows, whether it be the directors, the producers, they all know who the so-called uh, black person is, or the so-called black man is. They cast this Cirillo as in this role because they already know who he is. That's why they made him. Oh, that's why they alluded to Michael Jackson. They alluded to Moses, and they also alluded to Joseph. The picture on the left is just Cirillo. He's standing in front of the Pharaoh, the so-called Pharaoh, with Pharaoh's one of his advisors. And then the one on the right is just showing him being put in prison. Once again, these are just allusions to Joseph in the Bible. And then here are some other pictures showing, once again, Cirillo in captivity or in prison. And then once again, further proof showing that Cirillo here was in captivity. And notice also what he's wearing. He's wearing an outfit that's with the colors of black and white, showing the duality, the bringing together of opposites, as above and so below. And then also notice the sign that's above him, showing that he's going through a certain period and then he's going to come out enlightened. And then this here is the so-called Pharaoh. Once again, the ancient Egyptians did not look like this. This is just an Edomite or a so-called white person trying to imitate one of the ancient Egyptians. But the ancient Egyptians, once again, did not look like this. Okay, to provide some context to what I've been saying about Cirillo's allusion to Joseph, this here is Genesis chapter 37, verses 17 to 24. He says here, and the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him. And we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he may rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So this here is just the story of Joseph being thrown into the pit by his brothers because they were jealous of him. And then this is Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 to 5. It says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, king of the guard and Egyptian, bought him of the hand of the Ishmaelites, of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field." So Joseph was sold to Egypt by his brothers, and then through him being sold into Egypt, that's how Egypt was able to rise up in notoriety and in preeminence. So once again, this here is an allusion and proof to what I was talking about with Cirillo, why his so-called friends, gave him up to the Pharaoh so that through him going to captivity, he could again come back out and then be able to save them in the end. Okay, this here is just further proof to show that the to show that the what to show what to show that what was happening was in reference to ancient Egypt. On the right, people acting as the ancient Egyptian soldiers, and then on the left is the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh with his advisors. Once again, Cirillo was acting as Joseph, and he was also acting as Moses. Whoever directed this show cast him in that role because originally they already know who Cirillo is according to the Bible. Okay, this here is now an allusion to Moses. When Cirillo was taken to captivity, he came out and then he was made by someone who he was trained by the person who they refer to as the coach or as the so-called savior of the world. And then once he came out of the captivity, he came to save his friends from the so-called 10 plagues that were going on in Chalcopolis. So this here is an allusion to him, an allusion to Cirillo to being Moses. Okay, to provide further proof, this here is the biblical book of Exodus. It's Exodus. This is Exodus chapter 7, verses 7 to 10. He says here, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." As as was stated previously. Cirillo went down into Egypt, and then he came, and then he came out of the captivity of Egypt uh, to save his friends or his fellow patrollers from the reign of the Pharaoh. Once again, the people they were alluding to Cirillo being Moses because they already know who Cirillo is according to the Bible. Okay, I need to go back to this because this is going to be the last allusion that I saw while watching this show. Because when I was a little bit younger, I watched the show, and then I was seeing certain things in this show that confirmed to me that the directors and producers, whoever made this show, already knows who Cirillo is and already knows who the people of the Bible are. Okay, it says here in the description of Cirillo's character, it says that Cirillo Rivera is a good boy and the only child of so-called black ancestry in school. He is the son of a humble carpenter and a housewife who adore him to the utmost. So when I first watched this show, they were always talking about Cirillo's father being a carpenter. And then even in one of the episodes, the Maria Hokina's father, when he was chastising her, said that even Christ was a carpenter. And then when he just said that, I immediately knew that the people who made this show, they already knew who Cirillo was. That's why they cast his father, or they made his father a carpenter, because they're alluding to Joseph, the father of Christ. This is further proof to show, or this is proof to illustrate what I've just said. This here is Matthew chapter 13, verses 53 to 55, and it reads, "And it came to pass that when Yahushua had finished these parables, he departed thence, and when he was come into his own country, he told them in the synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished, and said, Whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas?" So the people, when Yahushua went to his own country and then he was preaching, the people were shocked because they did not expect the son of a carpenter to have all that knowledge and to be able to preach the way he was preaching. That's how you know that when Cirillo's father is referred to as a humble carpenter, they're really talking about Joseph. So they're alluding to Joseph from the Bible. That's how I know, and that's how you know that whoever made those shows, whether it be Patrullo Salvador or Carousel, they know who Cirillo is and they know who the people of the book are. Okay, this here is the Greek word for carpenter in Matthew chapter 13. The word there is tekton. It says it's the Greek number G5000 or 5045. The word there is tekton. It says from the base of G5098, an artificer as producer of fabrics, that is specially a craftsman in wood or a carpenter. So once again, Cirillo's father was a carpenter, which is an allusion to Joseph. When I first started the video, I showed how Cirillo was also alluded to Michael Jackson. And then once again, he was alluded to Joseph when Joseph went down to Egypt in captivity. And then he came out and then when Cirillo went down to the captivity, he came out as Moses. Those are all allusions to the people of the Bible. That's how I know that whoever made those shows, whether it be Carousel or Patrullo Salvador, they already know that Cirillo has to be a person of the book. That's why they cast him into those roles. I'm just gonna end the video with these two pictures here. Once again, this show here, Carousel, was it was to promote globalism, trying to force the man of color or the boy of color to come together with the young so-called white girl who never really wanted him. She was just forced to, or she had to be broken down periodically throughout the show to try to accept him. So this, and that thing is not good because that man was just, Cirilo was just, he was overdoing it. He was trying to force himself on Mario Aquino. But that is it. Once again, the allusions to Cirilo were Michael Jackson, Joseph, and Moses, because whoever made the show already knows who Cirilo is, according to the Bible. Good day.